Greetings, good evening, wherever you might be finding yourself in Namibia, and welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Communique. My name is Ricardo. Like I said, for tonight, we're dealing with a powerhouse, the European Union, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg representation. Of course, our ambassador that's representing us there is joining us here in studio, Dr. Kaapanda-Girnus, to talk to us about the relations and how we can deepen economic diplomacy with the EU and, of course, the missions that she represents. Doctor, thank you so much for making time out to join us for this evening.
Thank you for having me, Ricardo. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think first and foremost, I really just wanted us to reflect on the bilateral side of things before we move to the multilateral organizations. But besides Belgium, the EU, Luxembourg, and Netherlands, which other territories do you represent, or organizations do you also represent Namibia?
So our mission in Brussels has a very broad mandate. You're right to say that we cover Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. We cover the EU. In Brussels, we also have an organization called the OSCPS, the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, which is very, very important to us. It helps us with our engagement with the EU, but it's also a very useful platform for South-South cooperation. It's an organization with 79 member states. And then from Brussels, we also cover a number of Hague-based institutions, international organizations, including the ICC, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice. We cover the OPCW, which is responsible for the prohibition of chemical weapons. Very, very important mandate in terms of making the world a safer place. And we cover the HCCH, which is responsible for private international law. So it's a broad mandate, and we have to be strategic and smart in terms of where we direct our focus and our attention, and we have to prioritize. And in doing that, we are guided by our national priorities and by our foreign policy.
Well, focusing on bilateral relations for the first part, how would you describe our relations, our diplomatic relations with Belgium?
I think relations are excellent, and I would say that this applies to Belgium as well as the Netherlands. Maybe the viewers might recall that earlier this year in June we hosted the Dutch Prime Minister. And of course we've been having diplomatic relations with the Netherlands and with Belgium for a long time. Diplomatic relations were established soon after independence. But this was the first time that we hosted a Dutch Prime Minister in Namibia. And usually the visit of a foreign leader signifies that relations are growing, relations are deepening.
Especially at that level.
Absolutely, and he was actually in town with the Danish Prime Minister. And while the visit of the Dutch Prime Minister did focus on green hydrogen, because we're doing many interesting and exciting things together, when you look at the relationship with the Netherlands, it's really broad-based. We're doing a number of things in different sectors, and we've been doing that for quite some time. So we have a diversified relationship with the Netherlands. We have Namibian students who study in the Netherlands. We have Dutch companies which are active in a number of economic sectors. I think many people will know Shell. They're active in our oil and gas sector. Many companies will know Heineken, which is one of the world's leading brewing companies. They have now a controlling shareholding in Namibia breweries, but there are others. We have Dutch companies in the hospitality industry, and also one of my personal favorites in the blue economy sector, which is a strategic sector for our country, a company called Kelp Blue, and they're in the process of establishing a large-scale commercial kelp forest at Luderitz, at the coast. And in case people don't know what that is, they're growing at a commercial level seaweed, which is going to be harvested. It's going to be used for pharmaceuticals, for textiles, for agriculture. So it's a project that combines sustainability, because this is good for marine biodiversity, for ocean health, but it's combining that with innovation, with local value addition, with knowledge and technology transfer. And these are precisely the type of companies and the type of investments that we want to have.
And that automatically translates to job creation. I think we've got a very, very serious youth unemployment problem in the country, and perhaps that feeds into that as well.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to look at the how does the trade balance look like though with Belgium and with Netherlands for Namibia?
So maybe let me contextualize that by looking at the trade balance, that we have with the EU,
Okay.
Right? So when you look at the trade balance, you will see that we have a trade surplus, which means that the value of the goods that we export to the EU is actually higher than the value of the goods that we import. And this is normally considered a good thing. It means that we're earning foreign currency, that we're getting revenue, and that money can be reinvested in, as you said, in companies that create jobs. It can stimulate, the economy. Absolutely. But I always say that if you want to understand your trading relationship with a country, you need to look really closely at the numbers, and you have to also look at what you trade, what are you importing and what are you exporting.
Let's look at what are we importing, what are we exporting.
So this is where it becomes really interesting. So if you, for example, look at the figures from 2022, the value of the total trade or the goods that we exported to the EU was 1.3 billion euros, but 80% of the goods that we exported were primary goods, and only 16% were manufactured goods. And if you look closer, 41% of what we exported, it was base metals. And if you look at the other side, of course, not surprisingly, you see that the EU exported finished goods, manufactured goods. We're talking about machinery, electrical appliances.
With the raw materials that we had exported in the first place.
Indeed, and this is where the opportunity and the challenge lies. We need to clearly invest in new value chains in the country. We need to diversify. We need to have local value addition so that we stop exporting raw materials, unprocessed raw materials. We need to have finished goods. We need to have manufactured goods that we export to the EU, which will also fetch higher prices. And this will only improve, the trade balance.
The trade balance, and that's a very important point, because if you look at what President Kingob, of course, has reiterated over a number of times, saying, look, we cannot continue exporting raw materials, and in fact made a statement which many people now are regarding as a directive because it came from the executive. Why is it? I think we know the importance of not exporting, but how do we balance that transition? I think that's a bigger question, because remember, whenever we are holding back, others are losing. It's not going to be easy for you to let go of a multi-billion-dollar industry, for example, in as far as that is concerned. But how do we balance that? How do we make our counterparts understand that, listen, times have changed and our relationship should be negotiated on different tenets?
Absolutely. And I want to say that the government has been very consistent and very clear about this. And prior to the president making that statement, which was so well received, back home, and people also took note of that internationally. But prior to that, earlier this year in June, we had a cabinet decision where we also said that we're going to ban the export of unprocessed lithium and other critical raw materials and rare earths in unprocessed form. And this is very much in line with what we have said in our development strategies, what we have said in our national policies. And I think that we're being heard, and I think we have to defend what is right, and our international partners are beginning to listen. I think it's very clear, and we articulate this quite forcefully, that we want to have mutually beneficial partnerships where our partners understand that we have challenges to solve at home, such as the issue of unemployment that you raised before.
I just want to quickly throw a bit of salt on the wound there as well. If we look at this, of course, it's a good thing. I think philosophically we all agree that we need to get a little bit more for our natural resources. We need to add value, thereby create jobs and industry and move on. But here's the challenge. If you look at the main reason why a lot of these natural resources were also being sold off, the expressive, I'll take the dimension stone industry, for example. You get the exclusive prospective license as a Namibian, but I don't have the money to do any exploration, whatever it needs to be done. I don't have any money for exploration. I don't have any money for mining. So I sell it off wholesale. So that brings the question, if we are going to stop that, have we put the necessary precautionary, not only measures, but provided resources now to empower locals to be able to facilitate that value addition? That's the biggest question now that I'm sitting with.
Look, Ricardo, it's a Herculean task. We are talking about transforming the structure of our economy. We're talking about doing things radically different. And it's going to be difficult, it's going to be challenging, it's going to require changes here at home, domestically, and it's going to require new patterns of trade and investment, new relations that we are forming with our international partners, new things that we're advocating for. As you said, we need to empower our people, we need to attract money. We need to have the requisite, skills base in order to do that.
So this is not just political rhetoric, there's a plan.
There is a plan. And I think that, in terms of what I am responsible for, which is how to implement that plan international in our international, partnerships through our diplomacy, we do that through the types of partnerships that we put in place with our, with partners, strategic partners, such as the EU. So in the agreements that we negotiate with the EU, you see elements, potential solutions that will help us to address the challenges and the problems that you have just alluded to.
We're joined by, in the diplomatic communique, by Dr. Kaapanda-Girnus, our ambassador to Belgium and the EU as well. Stay with us. When we come back, we continue with more as we continue unpacking the economic diplomacy and, of course, bilateral relations between Namibia, EU, and Belgium. Stay with us. You're tuned into Diplomatic Communique with me, Ricardo Klankosep, and today, of course, we are joined by a powerhouse here in the studio, Dr. Kaapanda-Girnus, the ambassador to the European Union as well as Belgium, of course. Quite a heavy portfolio that you're carrying there. Hopes of a nation against the whole union in terms of what you're dealing with. But before we go a little bit detail in multilateral, I just wanted us to reflect a bit on Belgium. Of course, there's some exciting stuff coming up right now. Green hydrogen is the big play, and we know that there's a huge partnership with Clinergy, CMB, and ONL that have actually benefited from that pilot projects that they're implementing right now. Let's reflect on that quickly.
Absolutely. I think that in terms of the type of FDI that we want to attract, into the country, projects that will really benefit the local economy, this is one of the projects which has a huge potential to do so. And I'll tell you why. First of all, it's a joint venture, right? So it's an international company partnering with a local Namibian company, and they bring together the expertise and the know-how that they have. ONL has experience in putting up, solar plants in the country, and CMB is one of the oldest shipping companies in Belgium, over 100 years old, and they have experience. They have a clean tech division that has a lot of experience in hydrogen, applications. So they've come together, and as you have alluded to, they have a project near the coast, which was inaugurated, or it had a ceremony just a few weeks ago in September, where they're going to build what will be a first on the African continent, a green hydrogen production facility and a refueling station. And the work that they're doing with local applications is so important, because the refueling station will mean that you're going to have trucks, boats, locomotives, all sorts of vehicles being able to refuel and run on hydrogen. And I think this is important, because I think, rightly or wrongly, the perception sometimes that people have in our country is that we're producing green hydrogen primarily for export, that this is something that is going to benefit, people out there.
Elsewhere,
But this is something that will help us to decarbonize our local economy. And more importantly, because this project will be up and running, will be operational next year in the first quarter, it will really demonstrate that it is possible to produce green hydrogen in a cost-effective manner.
At scale.
At scale, exactly. And people will be able to visit. Namibians, we will be able to go into the facility. I think we will have a lot of international, visitors as well. This is a pioneering, project. And there's also going to be a green hydrogen academy, meaning that our people will be trained, they will be equipped, with the know-how, with the skills, in order to meaningfully participate in this industry. And the training academy will will not just be open to Namibians who are associated with the project, it will be open to all. And I think what really pleases me is that our relationship with Belgium in terms of our economic cooperation is growing. I think maybe initially people would say, what are we doing together with Belgium? Maybe people would say, oh, Belgium, there is Antwerp, it's the world's largest diamond trading platform, and that is the case. And this was initially sort of what we used to do together with Belgium, and we continue to do that. Our diamonds are traded in Antwerp.
But there's expansion now.
It's expanding.
What are some of the new areas besides the green hydrogen that you mentioned?
So, for example, and it's interesting that we have two brewing companies, one from the Netherlands and one from Belgium. But maybe what people don't know is that the largest brewing company in the world is AB InBev, and they have a brewing company or facility in Okahanja. And what they're doing there also is they're testing an innovative solar technology in order to decarbonize their own operations. And they have over 260 brewing factories around the world. So we could have a scenario where technology that has been tested and perfected in Namibia could help to decarbonize the operations of one of the iconic brands, that we have, in the world when it comes to brewing. But we also have another or two other examples, two Belgian companies that have opened charcoal processing facilities, and one with a packaging component as well. One is in Ucho and another one is in Arandis. The one in Arandis just was inaugurated again in September. So the relationship is growing, it's deepening, and we are seeing increasing interest in our country from the Belgian business community.
I think if one looks at this, there's just one that I really wanted to touch on, also issue also of the fact that when we're negotiating these new deals, particularly with the auspices of green hydrogen, quite a number of big numbers have been thrown around: 10 million, 30 million for this, 30 million for 40 million for scholarships, pilot projects, etc., etc. And one of the questions that one always wants to bring up, looking at, under the umbrella of I don't want to say neoliberalism. Some of these words have really been tainted. But the concern always is that, are we negotiating in a situation that we don't have to give up an airport in 10, 15 years from now? Or so how do we ensure, in fact, let me put it this way, how do we ensure generational equity, that the future generation are not indebted by the contracts and decisions that we're entering now?
Well, let me give you a personal answer. I think that when you are asked to serve in this role, representing your country and defending your national interests, abroad, you have a deep sense of responsibility and ambition, because we live in very, very difficult, times. We have challenges internationally, climate change, conflicts, arising, etc. But domestically, we have a lot of, challenges as well. And I think that we are deeply committed, diplomats, to negotiating good deals on behalf of the country. I think we are pursuing a foreign policy which is value-driven. We know what we need to do on behalf of the country. We know the challenges that we are supposed to address. And I think many of us are committed to a diplomacy that looks at tangible, benefits. And I think there's also an awareness, a historical awareness, that the deals of the past were maybe not as beneficial as they could be. So the new generation, agreements have to do better. They have to deliver better outcomes for our people.
Well, we're going to go for a quick break, Doctor, as we continue with our conversation for this evening. This is Diplomatic Communique. Stay with us. Welcome back to Diplomatic Communique with me, Ricardo. Of course, I'm joined by a powerhouse, like I mentioned a little bit earlier on. Quite excited to have Dr. Kaapanda-Girnus here with me for tonight's edition of the program, as we're focusing on our diplomatic relations with the EU, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Doctor, of course, before we went for the break, I really wanted to conclude the bilateral conversation, but there's just one I really needed to throw in here. We know that, of course, the Economic Partnership Agreement, it took years for us to negotiate for that. As part of the SADC EPA states, we are a member of that. It guarantees us duty-free and quota-free access to the European markets. How has that been working for us? Have we really been benefiting as Namibians?
I think we have. Quota-free, duty-free access means that our exporters can export as much as they want. There are no restrictions in terms of quantities, and there are no duties. And if you look at the EU market, it's a lucrative market, it's a high-priced market. So when you have that type of preferential access, it's obviously a competitive advantage for our exporters. And if you didn't have the EPA, the type of tariffs, the types of taxes that would be applicable to our products would be quite detrimental. I mean, with certain products, you're talking about maybe tariffs of more than 100%. Yeah. So this would be very disadvantageous.
So this is helping us to sidestep infant protection laws, etc., on the other side.
It is beneficial, but I think again, and this takes us back to our discussion about what are we exporting, to the EU, and what are we importing. I think what we still need to see is we need to diversify what we are exporting, under the Economic Partnership Agreement. We have this wonderful preferential access that we have negotiated, but over the last few years we have not seen an expansion of the types of goods that we are exporting to the EU. So we need to do a lot of homework in order to really reap all of the benefits that we potentially could have under this Economic Partnership Agreement.
Dr. Girnus, the concern for the survival of multilateralism as we know it has been a very, very serious one. We've seen so much fragmentation. The UN has been sitting on matters which the world has agreed on for 60, 70 years. So that's Palestine, whether it's the blockade of Cuba, you name it. And one or two countries will usually veto, and that's out of the window. We have all sorts of committees, etc. But frankly speaking, the confidence really is waning. And the reason why I'm bringing this in, of course, you represent ICJ and ICC, two very, very important organizations for justice globally. And we're seeing what's happening in West Africa. We're seeing what's happening in Ukraine and Palestine. What is the ICJ doing?
I think we have a crisis in confidence in international institutions, and we need to do something different in order to bring that confidence back. I think that multilateralism is in our DNA. I think our commitment to international solidarity, to working together globally, is a foundational principle, a foundational norm in our foreign policy. And this is not a surprise because of the history that we have. The reason why we are independent is because we were able to mobilize international cooperation, international solidarity, and we will continue to be a strong advocate and voice in the international arena for these principles. I think what you're highlighting is a problem that we see in a number of international organizations, and that is that they're becoming politicized, they're becoming utilized for purposes which are not correct. Oftentimes there is a problem with representation. People feel as if their voices are not being heard. So I think Namibia is one of the things that we're going to speak and continue to speak out about is the fact that we need these institutions, these organizations to be reformed. But
these institutions and organizations must work for us. And how long are we supposed to talk about reform? That's why when you look at public opinion also on what's happening in Palestine, many people are saying, look, how long was Hamas supposed to lie down and wait until this happens, until it continuously gets vetoed, etc., etc.? And even now, there are calls for the ICJ to take some action on what's happening there, what's happening in Ukraine, but we're not seeing them come out as strongly as possible. And that only leaves me to conclude that perhaps our political interest and individual interest override the humanity that you were referring to a little bit earlier on.
I would disagree. I think no matter how imperfect the international system is, it is the only alternative. We need international cooperation. If we just look back a couple of years ago, what happened during the pandemic? If we do not as humanity pull together and work together to solve the tremendous problems that we have, whether it's pandemics, whether it's climate change, whether it's inequality, domestically and internationally, we will not be able to do that if we don't work together. There is no alternative. And I think it was Martin Luther King who said that we will perish as fools if we don't work together. There is no alternative to international cooperation and multilateralism.
Well, Dr. Kaapanda-Girnus, before I close it off, I really just want to ask, of course, we know the mandate right now is economic diplomacy. At the 9th session of the conference of the heads of mission, the president really made it clear that we need to pursue economic policy in pursuit of development. In conclusion, from your side, what are perhaps some of the low-hanging fruits? Well, you don't have low-hanging fruits. You've got very big trees in green hydrogen in your backyard. But what can some of the small and medium enterprises, latch onto for now, while our big corporates like ONL are making their headway?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm very pleased about, and you can see this in the work that that we're doing, we work on mega projects, but we also focus on smaller projects, especially because those are the ones that bring immediate impact and tangible impacts. So we have done matchmaking. We have brought together, for example, the University of Namibia together with the University of Leuven. They're going to do a wonderful pilot project, together with a very innovative, hydrogen solar panel. So a lot of our interventions focus on, SMEs, ordinary Namibians, as well as sort of the bigger projects.
I couldn't say it better myself. Thank you very much for instilling that confidence and, of course, hope for small and medium enterprises to see what they can get from here. And thank you so much once again for making time out to join us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
There we have it, of course. That's our ambassador to Belgium and the EU, also representing Luxembourg as well as Netherlands, Dr. Kaapanda-Girnus, talking to us about the economic opportunities that are available from big companies down until the small and medium enterprises in as far as some of the new industries that are coming up. And, of course, once again, also reiterating that we need to fight for multilateralism. It's the only way that we can have a prosperous world for everybody. I'm Ricardo Knawasip. That was tonight's edition of Diplomatic Communique. Bye-bye.